Welcome to Flowing Practice Video 2. The purpose of this video, just like with Flowing Practice Video 1, is to give you some real practice flowing a real speech from a real debate round. Again, I'm going to flow on the document here, and I would encourage you to flow on your own and then just come back and check the document here once the speech is completed. Again, please excuse the handwriting. When switching to digital, it's not quite the same as flowing on a piece of paper, as well as the spacing. So while I have to budge over a few times on the piece of paper here, please try and keep it vertical on your own page so that you can simulate as best how it would be in a real round. Again, I'll go back and explain everything when it's finished, as well as answer any specific flowing questions if you need. You can always ask at the end or email me as well. Let's get started.
Uniqueness. Terror threats are mounting now. Bulletin 15. In the year Congress last considered the NSA program's global terrorist threat has dramatically increased. ISIS has grown rapidly, eclipsing Al-Qaeda as the largest terrorist threat. Yemen descended into chaos. Iran has expanded its support for the terrorist Houthi coalition. This is not the time to reduce our intelligence gathering capabilities against rising terror threats. Next. Link. Surveillance is the only method to stop terrorist attacks. Sanger and Shaker 13. The two biggest threats facing the United States, terrorism and cyber attacks, require the application of expanded computer monitoring. Direct government role in filtering internet traffic to the United States would effort to stop the destructive attacks on Wall Street. Next, impact. Terrorism causes the U.S. to lash out at nuclear war. Schwartz 15. Officials repeatedly issue their dire warning to the impending terrorist attacks. No attack materializes, especially in the light of the second American-led invasion of the Iraq War, justified to the public largely on the basis of non-existent nuclear weapons. Exaggeration may mislead on the event perspective that conditions aren't new, they existed since the dawn of the nuclear age. The world has been very fortunate and dangerous to effectively manage for so long. An objective assessment of current nuclear security situation and its future trajectory leads to an unavoidable conclusion. We are more vulnerable to nuclear terrorism than any time since the dawn of the nuclear age. On to case. Privacy. 1. No impact. Drone surveillance is only bad for criminals and terrorists. Most people won't even notice because they aren't committing crimes. We've got nothing to worry about. And 2. There is no absolute right to privacy. That's Gallatin 14. Technically, such a capability is not difficult. However, the policy of legal aspects of such technologies are more perplexing. We do not and never had the broad, unconditional right to privacy, a report on privacy, so-called government snooping. And 3. Privacy violations aren't unique. Drones are no different than all of the other ways that law enforcement can surveil criminals. It's no different from flying a plane. And 4. Requiring warrants in the instance of drones isn't feasible. It only records things that aren't in plain view, with no exception to privacy. McNeil 14. Legislators should reject the calls for a blanket requirement that all drones use accompanied by a warrant. They are overboard, and the ill-advised legislation requires warrants of drones that treats the information from a drone differently than from and gathering a manned aircraft. Under the Fourth Amendment jurisprudence, police are not required to shield their eyes from wrongdoing until they have a warrant. What is an unreasonable fear is that an ordinary aerial observations and that only controversial because they take place with a remote-controlled helicopter rather than a manned one. Dashcam video may be used as evidence of subsequent criminal proceedings under a word proposal. And the same piece of evidence gathered by a drone would be inadmissible in court because police did not have a warrant. Examples highlight required warrants for the evidence gathered by drones when other methods of gathering the same evidence would not require a warrant. And the app can't solve privacy. There are way more invasive violations of privacy all the time. Telephone metadata, internet searches, emails, library records, going through your house. It all do not require a warrant. And drone expansion results out of solvency. A drone expansion results in the broader Fourth Amendment right and solves all crime. Morrison 15. Drone surveillance might be an overlay upon current discriminatory practices. Those with political power would be more likely to complain the encroachment of their own privacy and the use of opportunity to reconsider all the ways in the Fourth Amendment has failed others. We need a new way of policing the streets, investigating crime, keep public safe. That drones technically provided for the omniscience in such a system make entire enterprises egalitarian. Unlike drones evoke the egalitarian's dream of omniperception embodied into the panoception. And drones contain the promise with the right tools we could achieve perfect knowledge. We would be able to solve unsolved shootings and disappearances. Next, drones are necessary to protect the border, stop trafficking, and find missing persons. That's Whitlock and Terming 14. The law enforcement agencies borrowing border patrol drones for domestic surveillance operations, nearly 700 surveillance missions on behalf of other agencies from 2010 to 2012. Records show that drones are being commissioned by other agencies other than previously known. More missions performed by the Coast mark the card at other agencies.
All right, I hope you're able to flow everything well. Again, my speech, my doc, had to sort of move over to the left here or to the right here some just because I didn't have the room in the document here. But again, please try and keep going downward. So if you were flowing this and on your paper, as hopefully you were now, it should, keep going down the page here. And then if you run out of room on the front, again, you can always flip to the back of the page or grab a new page. You don't want to move over like I did here, because for the 2AC now in the next speech, I'm not going to have any room here. I don't have any room to write the responses. So make sure you're flowing vertically. Don't copy, the way I did this here. This is just because digitally I don't necessarily have the space. Okay, I'll go through each of the arguments here just in case you can't read my handwriting. And then for each one, I'll point out any key points of how I flowed them and why I flowed them that way. So in this one, unlike in video 1, there were 2 positions here. They first read a disadvantage on terrorism, and then they jumped back onto case here. So the first piece of evidence they read was this bulletin piece of evidence, which said that terrorism, so I wrote TERR, is up. So the up arrow I use for like increasing or decreasing now. So that's kind of hard to see there. And I also wrote U. So this tells me this is the uniqueness of the dised. I didn't write, as you can see, I didn't like label dised at the top here. But that's one reason why writing U here, or writing like L for the link, is good there, because even if I don't have it labeled at the top here, if I see U, I know, okay, U for uniqueness, that tells me this is a dised. And I can come back and label it later if I need. Then I've got some warrants here. The type of things I flow in the warrants are places is a good one. They said that the NSC is another one, so where the information comes from. But they said that threats are up now in specifically places, groups like ISIS, and also in Yemen. So like I said, and like I talked about in the last video, the warrants, anything you can get is good, because if I'm responding to this, I can talk about, maybe make an argument about how ISIS maybe doesn't have the capabilities that they're saying, or maybe the conflict in Yemen has changed since 2014. So that's where these warrants can come in handy. Next, the link, they say that surveillance is key to, so K2 for key to solve. Surveillance is key to solve. That's their Singer and Shaker evidence. And then I have that the government is key to international surveillance there. Maybe not super helpful, but still good to get any warrants that you can. And then finally, that they read that terrorism leads to nuclear war, and that's the Schwartz evidence here. Again, I've been putting lines underneath each piece of evidence, because once I flip to case, so you'll notice that I labeled the case up top here, they have some analytic arguments. So for example, this first one here, how do I know it's analytic? There's no line underneath, as well as there's no author or date for the citation. So we can tell that specifically this argument and this argument here are, as well as this one here, these are all analytics because I don't have that line underneath. Now that doesn't mean I shouldn't necessarily answer them or anything. It just means that when I'm pulling out pieces of evidence, maybe I can respond to that. Maybe I don't need evidence like I would have otherwise, or maybe I don't need to read as much evidence, or maybe I can group it. So think about how you should treat the carded evidence versus the analytics there. So their first one says there's no impact to privacy because people don't notice. People don't notice any intrusions on their privacy. And again, that's just an analytic. Next argument was that there's no right to privacy, and that's their Gellington evidence here. And that just made sort of a legal argument that there's no universal right to privacy. Third argument they made was that privacy is not unique because things like law enforcement can, police can come into your house or property or anything like that at any time, even without a warrant to some extent, but that's a separate legal issue. Next thing they say is that getting a warrant is not feasible, that it doesn't make sense for surveillance drones to get a warrant. And then one thing you'll notice here is when I wrote this, the WARR, because I wanted to shorten warrant, But I wanted to make it specific because, war, we're talking about war. We also talked about like leads to nuclear war over here. So maybe I use one more letter for WARR for warrant, or you could underline it or put a period. Notice like surveillance here, I put SURV period. So that's one way, or yeah, even here like feasible to know that, there's more word there. I just cut it short. Next, they made another analytical argument that says the affirmative it's not able to solve privacy, and gave this big list. Things like phone data and emails apparently are invading people's privacy. The next argument was that expanding the Fourth Amendment, that the affirmative, that expansion of warrants increases the Fourth Amendment protection, so that's good. So even if we don't do the affirmative, it still results in the same expansions for the Fourth Amendment. And then one thing you could do is, for example, because this is maybe a legal argument that we might want to look a little more into in the debate, is you could maybe put a star next to this evidence, or maybe use a exclamation point, maybe use a different color next to it. That might be a good argument to flag in some way, just because this is sort of a more specific legal argument that they're making there, as well as it's a turn, that doing the affirmative is worse. If we don't do the affirmative, it leads to something better off. So that's because it's offensive argument, that's something that we want to definitely make sure that we answer specifically. As well as this next piece of evidence here is another offensive argument. They say that surveillance is key to solve for trafficking, human trafficking. So that's another one that we might want to flag there. Again, how you want to flag is up to you. But just because you definitely want to make sure you answer that, because if we don't answer that, that means that the affirmative results in something bad. And that alone is a reason why they could argue we should not do the affirmative. So starring or, in some way marking the offensive arguments is a great way to make sure that if you are giving the next speech, that you respond effectively to the most important arguments. All right, that's it for flowing practice 2. Again, I would recommend if you had any trouble flowing this speech, I would watch the video again, because every time you do, you'll hear it a little better, your flowing will become a little faster, and your skills will improve a little bit more. So before you move on to flowing video 3, I would try watching this one again and flowing it a second time.